Good evening, everyone. We have 1 minute before we start. If you would like to sign up to speak on citizen comments or public hearing, please do it now. We only have one individual taking minutes and running the system tonight, so please sign up now. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. This is Tuesday, April 25th, 2023, 5 o'clock. Thank you all for attending tonight's council meeting. We're going to have invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Segarra. Would you please stand? Most gracious Father, we thank you once again for bringing us together. We thank you for the leadership of the city staff, and also the residents. Father, we ask that you take control of this meeting, God, that everything will be done in decent and order, and that we move forward with the business of the city. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please join me in our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Segarra. We will now need approval of the agenda. Mayor Pro Tem.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Councilmember Boyd.
Second.
Thank you both. All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Motion carries. 6, Councilwoman Cobb. Okay, 6-0. Let the record show that Councilmember Cobb is not present. For the citizen petition, we're going to move on. It's been moved to May 2nd at the request of the citizen. We will now have citizen comments. On citizen comments, we will be sticking to the agenda items. You have 4 minutes to speak. Council, you have 1 minute. Melissa Brown. Good evening, ma'am. You have 4 minutes.
Good evening. I'm curious how much over budget WCID number 1 is on their generator project that would require the city of Killeen to pay $431,000 into this, another $500,000 on top of what we've already paid for the generator projects. How much is everybody else putting into this? Why are we going so far over budget on something that hasn't been that long since they got their estimates? I know that the closed captioning system was brought up last week, and it was mentioned that not all of what was wanted to be done with it could be used, the PEG grants couldn't be used for the whole system. So what exactly was it that couldn't be addressed with the PEG grants? Are we using strictly PEG grants for this one? And what did happen to the money that the city council approved in 2021? Because that's still a question that hasn't been answered. So if we didn't use the PEG money for closed captioning when the council approved it, what did the city use that money for? I'm still against using TERS funds for Anthem Park. All subdivision roads eventually become public infrastructure anyway. Every single one of us in this room live in a neighborhood that has roads that were built by developers when they were building the subdivisions, the apartments, whatever there was down that street, who then dedicated those roads over to the city. We never have given any kind of incentive back to any of our local developers just for building a subdivision and putting roads through it. It's a necessity for having people live there. It's a necessity for having people come in to shop. And the city has never given any kind of incentive back as far as TERS money just to put in a shopping center. Even if there is a road going through it, it's not going to connect from MLK over to Veterans, so it's not even a thoroughfare road. This is a road that simply makes another ingress-egress point into this housing area. If we were going to do anything to incentivize this project, a 380 agreement would be better because that's directly relating to sales taxes. That's directly relating to the benefit that the city would get out of it as a whole. The city won't get anything else from this other than property tax, which we get from everyone anyway. I don't think we should be exempting any additional platted or non-platted land from the parkland dedication ordinance, with the exception of District 1 and just barely. Every single one of the districts in our city is currently in a park deficit. So the more that we exempt, the further we fall into this deficit, or the more that the city actually has to come out of pocket to pay for parks. Why not give this a chance to work? I don't see it inhibiting anything. We don't have that much that's pre-platted that's going to have a huge effect on not being able to get it developed, especially in North Killeen revitalization area, where it would mean that they are not going to develop it because they have to dedicate any park space or pay fees in lieu of. And then as far as these certificates of obligation, out of $30 million, the only one that I can see there that is a necessity is one project, the fleet maintenance building, that is in desperate need of, we can't even repair it. It's too small for a lot of the vehicles that we have, which causes us to either outsource or do that repair work outside. So out of the 30 million, only 17 million is really something that's a necessity over a want or a desire. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, you're welcome. Consent agenda.
MN 23008, consider minutes of regular city council meeting of March 28, 2023. RS 23067, consider a memorandum resolution accepting a Federal Aviation Administration Airport Infrastructure Grant for the design of the Security Improvements Project at Killeen Fort Hood Regional Airport. RS 23068, consider a memorandum resolution approving a professional services agreement with Garver LLC for the design of the Security Improvements Project at Killeen Fort Hood Regional Airport in the amount of $120,900. RS 23069, consider a memorandum resolution approving a fireworks display application at the Killeen Athletic Complex on July 1st, 2023. RS 23070, consider a memorandum resolution authorizing change orders with Silsby Ford for the total amount of $225,278. RS 23071, consider a memorandum resolution authorizing addendum number 8 for the Bell County Water Control and Improvement District Number 1 Lake Belton Plant Power Resilience Project in the amount of $431,789. RS 23072, consider a memorandum resolution securing a closed caption system. RS 23073, consider a memorandum resolution approving a tax increment reinvestment zone reimbursement agreement with CSW Killeen LP for reimbursement of certain infrastructure costs associated with development of Anthem Park in an amount not to exceed $12,741,099. RS 23074, consider a memorandum resolution authorizing proceeding with issuance of certificates of obligation for capital projects and further directing the publication of notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation for capital projects. OR 23009, consider an ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Code of Ordinances, providing for certain exemptions to the Parkland Dedication and Development Ordinance. The caption of the ordinance reads, an ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Killeen, providing for certain exemptions to the Parkland Dedication and Development Ordinance, providing for the repeal of conflicting provisions, providing for a severability clause, providing for a savings clause, providing for publication and an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mayor Pro Tem.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. Councilmember Boyd.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, yes. Let the record show Councilwoman Cobb is present. All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Councilwoman Cobb and Councilmember Adams, you can vote. Councilwoman Cobb, is that a yes or a no? Okay, I'm assuming that's, you can say,
It's yes.
okay, thank you.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. I couldn't, oh, he
Madam
voted
Mayor?
against it, 6-1. And yes, who called my name?
That was me about the vote.
Oh, 6-1. Oh, yes, ma'am. Thank you. Whenever you're ready, Madam Secretary.
PH 23023, hold a public hearing and consider a request submitted by Franklin Land Associates LLC on behalf of Castrong LLC, case number Z23-03, to rezone approximately 2.34 acres out of the B.S. Hoover Survey abstract number 463 from A Agricultural District to NBD Neighborhood Business District with the conditional use permit to allow for a single-tenant general retail store no greater than 10,641 square feet. The property is located east of State Highway 195 and north of the Lampasas River, Killeen, Texas. The caption of the ordinance reads, "An ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the City of Killeen by changing the zoning of the property being approximately 2.34 acres out of the B.S. Hoover Survey, abstract number 463, from A Agricultural District to NBD Neighborhood Business District, with a conditional use permit to allow for a single-tenant general retail store no greater than 10,641 square feet, providing a savings clause, providing for the repeal of conflicting provisions, providing for an effective date."
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Council, Mr. Revelle went over the presentation last week. Would you like for him to go back over it? Thank you. Is the applicant here? And if so, would you like to speak, sir? Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Joe Johnston with Gresham Smith. We're engineers that assist Franklin Land Associates with their retail program, and I'm here to answer any questions and to try to get your support.
Thank you, sir. Council, do you have any questions? Councilmember Adams?
Hey, just a quick question. I don't know if you know the answer, but why there? That's just as you come in the city, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm
And
sorry.
what building the retail center, what's the target audience? Or,
We're rezoning the property for a retail store. It's going to be a Dollar General.
okay.
That's all, sir. Thank you. Public hearing is open. Melissa Brown, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you. To the councilman's point, I had the opportunity to drive by there just yesterday. My son is graduating from high school and has a job offer, but the only place we can get him employment right now is in Round Rock. So in the drive there and coming back, I specifically looked for this location. It is right after you come into the city limits of Killeen. We have this beautiful landscapes, welcome to Killeen sign. You have a bridge, and then you have a whole lot of nothing. And we want to interrupt that to put a Dollar General store there when we have a lot of them in the community already. At the beginning of the comprehensive plan process, the city council at the time voted to reserve the 195 corridor for manufacturing and commercial. I don't believe the intent at that time was for commercial to mean retail stores, especially more Dollar Generals, when there's nothing around there population-wise. If stuff comes in the future, then it comes in the future, but for right now, there's not enough there to support going into what's a controlled development area that we shouldn't even be considering developing for at least the next 10 years, according to our comprehensive plan. That is in a controlled development area. And yet we want to put a Dollar General there instead of reserving land for potentially manufacturing, and then to have a Dollar General exiting and entering onto the highway in a 75-mile-an-hour zone, I don't think is safe either. I think this is a bad idea to put it there. I don't see where it suits any purpose. There's not enough housing out there at this time to meet a demand for that. And there's plenty of other stuff not too far down the road. You go just down to Swan Ranch, and there's a Dollar General right there on Swan Ranch, also on 195. Do we want the entryway, the only one we have left that isn't cluttered with housing, retail, and restaurants, to be welcomes to Killeen? We have Dollar Generals.
Thank you. Public hearing closed. Councilmember Sagara.
Mayor, I'd like to move to, we approve page 23-023.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Councilwoman Cobb, is that a yes or a no?
It's a yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Motion carries 6-1 with Councilmember Adams in opposition. Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready.
PH 23024. Hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance submitted by Patrick Purifoy on behalf of P&T Enterprises, case number Z23-05, to rezone approximately 6.43 acres out of the Passion for Christ Ministries addition, Block 1, Lot 1, from B1 Professional Business District to B1 Professional Business District with a conditional use permit to allow for a daycare as a permitted use. The property is locally addressed as 3100 Little Nolan Road, Killeen, Texas. The caption of the ordinance reads, "An ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the city of Killeen by changing the zoning of the property being approximately 6.43 acres out of the Passion for Christ Ministries addition, Block 1, Lot 1, from B1 Professional Business District to B1 Professional Business District with a conditional use permit to allow for a daycare as a permitted use, providing a savings clause, providing for the repeal of conflicting provisions, providing for an effective date."
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Council, Mr. Revelle presented the slides last week. Would you like for him to do it again? All right, thank you. Is the applicant here? And if so, would you like to speak? Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. Last week, I yielded my time due to the contentious behavior from some citizens towards the council. I felt the council needed a quick breather, if you will. But I'm back tonight to speak on this matter that will be voted on later in the agenda. I'm the owner of 3100 Little Nolan Road. More specifically, I'm the new owner of 3100 Little Nolan Road. I want to offer to you some recent history about this property and this property being presented before the City Council for rezoning. When I was pursuing the property for purchase, it was advertised in multiple online spaces that included the MLS and LoopNet as a commercial property. Early on in the transaction, I and my bank discovered that the property was actually zoned residential and not commercial. Long story short, I and my bank insisted the previous owner have the property rezoned to commercial. That was the only way the bank was going to release the funds for this transaction to close. The previous owner and his realtor knew that I was going to relocate my real estate business to this location. They had no knowledge of my future plans beyond relocating my real estate office here. To be honest with you, neither did I. I recognized the property as a good investment and excellent potential, with the excellent potential that it has, and it does. So in their request to the Planning and Development Department and to the City Council, they requested B1 zoning, and you all graciously granted that request. Today I come before you as the new owner of 3100 Little Nolan Road. This property is a 6.5 acre property, plus or minus, with 3 buildings. My business only operates out of one of the 3 buildings. I was right. The property does have excellent potential. I've been approached by 2 different daycare operators seeking to lease the other 2 buildings for daycare. And to be very transparent with you, my original rezoning request was for a B2 zoning, as Mr. Ravel stated last week. There's so much more potential in this property. There's so much more that can be done with this property, which was my reasoning.
Sir, I apologize. Please, Councilwoman Cobb, put your speaker on mute.
Which was my reason for requesting B2 from Planning and Development. However, after several impassioned phone calls from Planning and Development, they said they would only support a request for B1 with a conditional use permit. So, here we are tonight. I'm here to encourage you to vote in favor of rezoning to B1 with a cup. By doing so, you will be assisting me help other businesses be born and or grow. A daycare would generate 10 to 12 new jobs and offer readily available daycare services to my immediate neighbors and the community at large. And I do want to be very transparent. A B2 is what I desire and will be back in the future to request from Planning and Zoning in this council. That is all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
Thank you, sir. Public hearing is open. Public hearing is closed. Mayor Pro Tem.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve.
Thank you. Councilmember Boyd.
Second.
All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Councilwoman Cobb. Okay, that's a yes. That's a thumb up for yes, okay. The motion carries 6 to 0. Councilwoman Gonzalez has left the dais, but she will return. Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready.
PH 23025, hold a public hearing and consider a request submitted by Mitchell and Associates, Inc. on behalf of Sandra and Ronnie Skinner, case number Z23-07, to rezone Lot 1, Block 1, Skinner Estate, Phase 2, from A Agricultural District to R1 Single Family Residential District. The property is locally addressed as 3638 Love Road, Killeen, Texas. The caption of the ordinance reads, "An ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the City of Killeen by changing the zoning of the property being Lot 1, Block 1, Skinner Estate, Phase 2, from A Agricultural District to R1 Single Family Residential District, providing a savings clause, providing for the repeal of conflicting provisions, providing for an effective date."
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Councilor, Mr. Revelle presented this last week. Do you have any questions? Thank you. Is the applicant, is he here? And he or she, sir, would you like to speak? Good evening, sir.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Council. It's Bob Mitchell, Mitchell and Associates, representing the applicant here this evening, looking to rezone the property so it can be used as a residential development sometime in the future.
Are there any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Public hearing open, public hearing closed. Mayor Pro Tem.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve PH 23-026.
Thank you.
No, I'm sorry. 26.
It's
Am I
a
right?
2-5.
25, sorry.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
That's no problem. Councilmember Boyd.
Second.
All in favor, yes. All opposed? Thank you, sir. All opposed, no. Councilwoman Cobb, is that a yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Motion carries 7 to 0. Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready.
PH 23026. Hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance submitted by Franklin Land Associates LLC on behalf of Whitus Investments LTD, FLUM number 23-01, to amend the comprehensive plan's future land use map from a public space designation to a residential mix designation, being approximately 3.727 acres out of the CT Berlin Survey, abstract number 137. The property is located on the east right-of-way of East Tremere Road and north of Andalusia Lane, Killeen, Texas. The caption of the ordinance reads, "An ordinance amending the comprehensive plan's future land use map to change approximately 3.727 acres out of the CT Berlin Survey, abstract number 137, from a public space designation to a residential mix designation, providing a severability clause, providing a savings clause, providing for the repeal of conflicting provisions, providing for a publication and an effective date."
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Council, Mr. Revelle presented the slides last week. Would you like for him to present it again? Thank you. Is the applicant here? Sir, would you like to speak again? No, sir, they don't. Thank you so much. Public hearing is open. Melissa Brown. You have 4 minutes.
I go back to the fact that on our comprehensive plan that was unanimously passed by this city council, this is in a controlled development area that shouldn't be developed. City council just saddled the citizens with millions of dollars for parkland development in a previous item that was approved. The city council also just exempted a lot of other spaces from having to adhere to parkland dedication. Now we're taking something that is currently marked as public space, which should be used for parks, walking trails, and other outdoor activity for the public, and making the consideration to use it as a residential mix. My understanding on this flume change is that if approved, it would eventually become another Dollar General. We currently, in that area, have Dollar Generals at Featherline and Chaparral, W.S. Young and Stagecoach, Stagecoach and 195, Mountain Lion and Knight's Way, Cunningham and Stan Schluter, 195 at Spawn Ranch, now 195 at Lampasas River. There's also one at Mountain Lion and Knight's Way. Granted, that's in Harker Heights. It's still within about 1.5 miles to 2 miles from where this one would be requested to be put in. Under a residential mix, there is no need to come back and get a zoning change because this would be able to be put into a residential mix area. It wouldn't have to be specifically a B3 if my understanding is correct, and I would certainly appreciate any clarification on that, as I'm sure the council would also. But again, we're talking about taking land that, in this case, is specifically supposed to be for parks and open space and public space to turn it into another retail store. I would also mention that directly across the street to this on the west side of East Tremere is where Thousand Oaks is. And on the frontage of East Tremere at Thousand Oaks, there are 2 B5 approved plats already. So if it's really that important to have a 9th Dollar General within a 2 to 3 mile radius, let's just put it where it's already zoned for retail to go in and have it there instead of using this land that's in a flood zone that could potentially contaminate a protected waterway, because Tremere Creek is a protected waterway with TCEQ. Why would we risk all of that just for another Dollar General to have a 9th one, a 10th one, a 12th one? How many is enough? I don't see a Dollar General as completing my neighborhood. We're putting a Star Mart in over at Rosewood and Stagecoach right now, which is another opportunity for small shopping. There is a large convenience store gas station right there at the corner of East Tremere and Stagecoach. I don't see where this brings any benefit. This is my neighborhood. This is the area that I live in. I do have a vested interest in what goes there. That's all, but I would strongly request the council disapprove this request.
Public hearing closed. Council, what is your pleasure? Councilmember Boyd.
Make a motion to approve PH 23-026.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Councilwoman Cobb. Is that a thumbs up for yes, or?
She said yes, she got it.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 7-0. Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready.
PH 23027, hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance amending Killeen Code of Ordinances, Section 31-833, demolition by neglect. The caption of the ordinance reads, "An ordinance amending Chapter 31 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Killeen, providing for amendments to the demolition by neglect regulations, providing for the repeal of conflicting provisions, providing for a severability clause, providing for a savings clause, providing for publication and an effective date."
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Council, Mr. Revelle presented these slides last week. Would you like for him to go back through them? Thank you. Public hearing is open. Melissa Brown, you have 4 minutes.
You're going to try this again. I think part of what's frustrating to the audience right now is we go from a week of not being heard to a week of not hearing anything from the council members. There's been zero discussion on anything that's been voted on. So with this one, demolition by neglect, changing it so that a single staff member would have the authority to declare something demolition by neglect. Well, it seems like it may be the most convenient and the most time-saving way to go about it. We have a Heritage Preservation Board for a reason. The council appointed those same people to that board for a reason, because they have a passion, they have an understanding. They may have different ideas. The staff is understandably on a one-track mind right now because there's a goal at the end of this. And that means for the ease of the staff doing this by whatever means necessary, taking it away from the citizens that the council appointed to make these suggestions and recommendations, and putting it in the hand of a single staff member who now would be able to hold somebody's entire livelihood and investment in their hands. How is that fair to anybody who owns property? My money, my property, my choice. This is more use it or lose it and do it the way the city wants, because now this would give the opportunity for the city to say, you're not doing it the way we want it in the timeline we wanted, and there is no way to get around it. The city is going to make this determination. It doesn't necessarily mean that that building will be demolished or that a lien will be placed on it or a lien will be called, but it sure does make it a lot easier. I attended the Heritage Preservation Board meeting where I heard the explanation, saying this doesn't mean that we're going to do it. It just allows us to go on to the next step to try to force compliance. When I hear try to force compliance, what that means is we're going to try to force people to do what we want with their property regardless, so we can get to an end goal. We may not always agree on everything. The people sitting up there amongst each other, between the dais and the gallery, as citizens, even staff members, I'm sure disagree on things sometimes. But we should all be able to agree that putting one person solely in charge of what can happen to a property that someone has invested their time, their money, or even their inheritance into, their ability to potentially have generational wealth. The last meeting I was at, we have an active duty soldier who purchased a building in the middle of COVID and is currently in Korea, who did not have the opportunity to do as much work as the city would have wanted because he's there. And now his building is deemed demolition by neglect, even though the property owners in downtown came and said, we can see what a difference there is. We can see that this person has really cleaned up their property. There was no going back and double checking to see, was the roof repaired? Nobody there knew it, even though the owner of the property called in. Even though the owner of the property had called into the meeting and said that in order for them to buy it, in order for them to get it financed, the roof had to have been fixed. That is the primary, from my understanding, definition of demolition by neglect. Don't take this out of the hands of the citizens that you appointed. Stop shutting down our voices. Start listening, please.
Thank you. Public hearing closed. Councilmember Alvarez.
Thank you, Mayor. We did speak about this at last Tuesday's workshop, but I wanted to reiterate since one of our citizens made some comments that may sound valid at face value. These downtown properties, if you're familiar with them, the ones that are dilapidated and abandoned have been that way for years. I'm born and raised here in Killeen since 1978, and it's no surprise that these buildings are in this condition. Again, if a owner gets a letter in the mail from the city and code enforcement and saying your building is deteriorating, I highly doubt that it's going to be a surprise to that owner, like, oh, wow, I did not know my building was falling apart. If you go back and Google Earth, which you can go back to aerial maps and street views from at least 10 years ago, you'll see that these buildings have been this way for a long time. There haven't been tenants in them. So again, it's no surprise. And the fact that a staff member will be able to move this process forward, I think, is a good thing, because again, these buildings have been this way for a long time. A lot of them are owned by the same individuals who refuse to do anything to the buildings and just sit on them, further adding to the to the issue of downtown. Again, I don't see where there's anything but benefit to this. If you're an owner, then like anything else in life, you have to maintain what you have, whether it's your body, your car, your house, or an investment, a building that you make. And again, I think common sense prevails in a lot of this stuff. If an owner buys a building and maybe he didn't do an inspection and he's completely unaware of the condition, so it is a surprise to him, it's not like they're going to throw him in jail and give him all these fines right away. He's going to have an opportunity to come into compliance. This program is just helping to move that along. Again, if you're pulled over by a police officer, he's not going to take your ticket to court to have a determination made by a group of people whether or not he should give you that ticket. It's the same thing with code enforcement. If you're guilty, you're guilty, and you need to do what you need to do to make it right. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a question for the Planning and Development Director regarding this.
Mr. Revelle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome, sir.
And just for clarity and reminder for the public, the reason for this proposal, if I'm not mistaken, it was for efficiency in the process.
Absolutely, Councilman Board, and I totally agree with all of Councilman Alvarez's comments that he made as well. It's really for efficiency. And again, we've got to keep in mind that what this will allow is a determination to be made so that we can start code enforcement actions. And so as Councilman Alvarez said, people will have an opportunity to engage and do what they need to do to self-correct, but this will allow us to start that action. So instead of have to wait 4 to 6 weeks to start that action, it can happen the same day or in a couple of days.
Understood. Thank you for that clarity. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve PH dash 23-028.
Thank you,
I'm sorry, this is the wrong one. 27.
27.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyd. Councilmember Adams.
I had a question with,
Well, we need a second to the motion.
a second.
Councilmember Adams, the floor is yours.
Is it normally 6 weeks for the process to happen when it just went towards the board? Or is that something that the city sets or we set in policy? Because I'm trying to figure out why, did we create the situation where we had to now make it one individual as opposed to the committee?
It takes about 4 to 6 weeks because we have to set up the committee meeting. And so we have to provide notification. We have to set that meeting up, make sure we have a quorum. Once you go through that process, we've done about 4 cases so far. because this has been in the ordinance for quite some time, just not being used. We've done 4 cases so far, and on average, it's taken about that amount of time that I mentioned.
So the issue we're having our members of that board not showing up.
Well,
And-
it's not an issue of them not showing up, it's just making sure we can, they don't meet on a regular basis, they meet on an as-needed basis, as we call, and so we have to be mindful and respectful of their schedules as we work to try to set that up.
Okay, yeah, you see where I'm getting at?
Sure.
I'm just trying to figure out,
So there could be some occasions and some opportunities where it maybe is a little bit faster than 4 weeks or a little bit faster than 6 weeks, but it won't be as fast as if you approve this process would be.
all right, and then so the appeal process, so if someone receives it, if, let's say we went to the one person, can that individual, and I know this really deals with those long-term properties, can the individual still, who would they come to appeal an issue? Would it still be the board or would it be to the council?
So none of the process changes. So because it's just a determination that the structure is demolition by neglect. And it's a determination that allows code enforcement actions to begin.
Right, okay, not the immediate seizure
there's-
or just,
No. No. So at that point, when code enforcement begins, then they have an opportunity to engage and, as I mentioned earlier, self-correct.
okay. Yeah, I asked these questions, 'cause I see the appearance, because we've cut down committee sizes, and this looks like we're taking away some authorities of the committee. And I can see the impression that would give to any resident, namely the members. But I just also wanted to clarify, so the Preservation Board still has some authorities as it relates to this. This just starts the process.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To caveat on what Mr. Adams is saying too, well, I agree with this. And I know there's the concern that we are not or that we're cutting down on sizes of different committees and whatnot, but it is important that we remain somewhat efficient. Everything can't be run through committee. Not every decision is made especially this.
Yeah.
We are not getting rid of groupthink and policy making. What we are is just one aspect of this one process, where instead of having a group of people make the decision, which we all know can be pretty intricate, we're just relying on the one person to make the determination of whether or not the property is neglected, is officially demolition and neglect. So I don't have a problem with it. I do see what Mr. Adams is saying is that, yeah, as we continue to go through different policies, we need to be mindful of the fact that, yeah, do we want to have the citizens be able to give their view and their thought on things? That's great. But once we get into the minutia of actually running processes, I think we do have to be careful about how many people we put on board to get a yes or a no. So that's my thought on this.
Yes, sir. And there's one thing I failed to say that I said last week. If you look at this ordinance, you'll see that when you get to the demolition by neglect section, there is the items associated with demolition by neglect are prescribed. So they're specifically listed there. It's clearly and specifically listed.
Excuse me, just one last thing. So it's not just an arbitrary decision by one quote-unquote king or queen who's just making a random decision. There are actually specific things they have
It's
to.
very clear and very sufficient.
Thank you.
Mr. Revelle, I thank you and your staff for holding property owners accountable for their building and revitalizing and cleaning up the downtown area. I thank you and your staff for putting this in place.
Yes,
With that,
ma'am. Thank you. And I'd just like to say thank you to you and to the council for your support.
thank you, sir. So you have another question I just saw.
He actually touched on it. Thank you very much at the end,
Yes,
just to
ma'am.
confirm that determination, if the property meets that criteria, it's laid out specifically, it looks like, in this ordinance. So
Yes,
there
ma'am.
is no random thought as to how we make this decision or come to that conclusion. It is clearly lined out as to what constitutes a demolition by neglect.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Thank you, Mr. Revelle. Councilwoman Cobb? Yes, ma'am.
Mike, I have
Okay.
a quick question. Mine's just for a question. Are we voting, or do I get to ask the question?
No, we haven't voted yet. Please ask your question.
Okay, my question is that, will the property owner, since it's only one person, or whatever property is being demolished, will they get a chance to see that? Will it be in writing? Is it a form that they receive? How does that happen with just one person?
Yes, ma'am. So when the determination is made, they will receive notice concerning that determination. They also will be informed what they need to do in order to remedy the matter.
So that was my question. So they do get that, even though it's only one person that's following this graph or this information sheet, that person does get a chance to get it, receive it, make the changes before we move forward.
Yes, ma'am. And that notice is.
That's all I need to know.
Oh, okay.
That's good. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
I like it. No, I don't mean to cut you off, but
Miss-
okay, I get it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rebel. All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Councilwoman Cobb, is that a yes or no?
Yes,
Thank you.
it's a yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 7-0. Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready.
PH 23028, hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance amending ordinance number 22-097 to change the Bell County dedicated tax rate for TERS number 2. The caption of the ordinance reads, an ordinance amending ordinance number 22-097, amending the tax increment reinvestment zone number 2 project and financing plan. Termination date and boundary, providing a savings clause, providing for the repeal of conflicting provisions, providing for a severability clause, providing for publication and an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Council, Mr. Rivera presented this last week. Would you like for him to present it again? Thank you. Public hearing is open. Public hearing is closed. Council, what is your pleasure? Mayor Pro Tem.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Adams.
Yes, second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Councilwoman Cobb.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Motion carries 7-0.
Yes.
Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready.
PH 23029, hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance readopting the youth curfew, first of 2 public hearings. The caption of the ordinance reads, an ordinance readopting a curfew for persons under 17 years of age to prohibit their being in any public place from 11 p.m. on any Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday until 6 a.m. the following day, and from 12:01 a.m. until 6 a.m. on any Friday or Saturday, or on any day from June 1st through August 15th. Providing definitions, providing enforcement procedures, providing penalties consisting of a fine for minors not to exceed $500, and for parents of minors consisting of a fine of not less than $50, but not to exceed $500. Adopting certain defenses, repealing all ordinances in conflict with the provisions of this ordinance, providing a savings clause, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Council, this item will not need a motion because it is not the second public hearing. Good evening, Assistant Chief Gearhart.
Council. This is the same presentation we had last week. Would you like to go through it again?
Council, no? Okay, thank you, sir, so much. Thank you. Public hearing is open. Melissa Brown. Good evening, you have 4 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. I think you overlooked that I signed up for the last one also, but the vote's been taken, so I'll pass. My concern with the curfew ordinance is that we have just passed Prop A because a lot of citizens felt it was unfair to put a criminal record onto minors over something that may be considered insignificant over the rest of their life. When it comes to the curfew, this would be a Class C misdemeanor offense and conviction for both minors and their parents and/or business owners that allow a minor to be in their place of business recreationally after curfew hits. In those instances, we would be fining minors that most likely don't have a job, especially if it's during the school year and they're under 17. We would be fining parents and we would be fining our businesses, even if it's just to allow someone under the age of 17 to stay in a supervised place of business where they are not getting in trouble, where they are doing something productive. I think that there should be some amendments made to this ordinance. I don't believe a first-time offense, if the minor is doing nothing else wrong, should constitute a misdemeanor conviction on their record. I also feel like we should remove any penalty against a business owner. I don't think that we expect business owners to go through and start IDing everyone who's in their place of business. My children, for example, like to play Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering, and there are several card stores in the area that allow for that. Oftentimes, they have tournaments that'll run past midnight. My daughter is 14. I allow her to go to those because it's someplace that's safe, that's structured, where she's supervised, where I know she's not getting into any trouble, and to think that that business could be in trouble for providing that type of environment is counterintuitive to everything we're trying to do to reduce crime and keep these young people from having criminal records. I do think that it's important to have a curfew. I just think that there need to be some changes to it as far as not having it be on the first offense, and also reconsidering not having it be an offense against the business owner just because they allowed someone to be in their business after curfew. Mayor, I understand the timer isn't up, and I know I'm very close to my time, so respectfully, I will end because I feel like I've used my 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, and also, Melissa Brown, I apologize, I overlooked the one that you had signed up for. Truly apologize. Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready. Oh, public hearing closed. No vote.
PH 23030, hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance amending the FY 2023 annual budget of the City of Killeen to adjust revenue and expenditure accounts in multiple funds. The caption of the ordinance reads, an ordinance of the City of City Council of the City of Killeen, Texas, amending the FY 2023 annual budget of the City of Killeen to adjust revenue and expenditure accounts in multiple funds, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing a savings clause, and establishing an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mrs. Drake, Council, Mrs. Drake went over the slides last week. Would you care for her to go back over it?
Absolutely not.
Okay. And that's a no. All righty then. Public hearing. Mr. Fornino. Good evening, sir. You have 4 minutes.
Good evening. My comments tonight on this, when it comes to the budget items, I'm generally out of my depth on this sort of thing when you go into the guts of it. My primary concern is within the budget, that $2 million that goes to the homeless initiative. Now, we have given alternate suggestions for location and all that. My concern is, if the funding is approved, is that going to tie it to that address on Atkinson that seems to be in contention? I mean, if we're hell-bent on building the homeless shelter with that funding, my concern is primarily the location with its proximity to several schools, a daycare center, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that point has been raised several times with regard to, this is not an indictment on the entire homeless population, but I mean, we do have people within that population that have verified legitimate mental problems, and some, hopefully if they are registered sex offenders, they have corrected themselves, and they still have to follow the laws and all the restrictions on that. But by default, if they get placed in a facility that's too near a school, they could be basically put in a bad position of breaking the law. I'm just wondering, so this is more of a question on that. I hope that we're not tied.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are on the budget and not so much as zoning, but Mr. Cagle stated that he would answer the question.
Sure.
Mr. Cagle?
That funding this doesn't tie it to any location. That's going to require future agenda items.
Okay, that was just on that. It seemed a little muddy, and when it comes to specifics on the line items of the budget, I admittedly, that's not my area of expertise, so I just wanted to verify that. I mean, so just for the record, I'll leave it with that. I mean, with the funding, like I said, I know that we're going to build it, alternate suggestions for locations or options. It's still going to be open for discussion as to where we actually build it or refurbish.
There is the proposal at that site, but it's not been approved by council. It's not, there's no authorization to spend this money. This is just budgeting it. So it'll have to come back to city council.
Okay, that's my concern is, I mean, you could have people, in the homeless population that are put in legal jeopardy through no fault of their own, and then there's also public safety concerns if, it goes there anyway. I would just, with that particular line item budget, just keep that in mind, just for overall safety, and it's just one of those things where, just keep in mind.
Melissa, thank you. Melissa Brown, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you. And thank you to the city manager, because that answered one of my questions regarding the location. Even with that, approving $2 million for a shelter to be constructed that is supposed to be operated and maintained by a nonprofit that has not been formed yet. I think we are acting way too prematurely on this. Instead, I think that we take that $2 million, we don't take out a $2 million bond to build a new rec services facilities building, and we take the $2 million and build that. That saves us the debt for the recreation building. We're over at Condor Park. And it also allows us to wait until we actually have something put in place for this nonprofit, which ideally would be able to come up with some sort of grants, donations, or other funding if they're going to build a new shelter in addition to the ones that we already have in the city. I also have a question about item number 5, which is the 380 agreement for the Walmart Supercenter. It said the FY23 budget included $200,000 for the first of 5 payments to pay the economic development incentive payment. However, it was decided to be paid in 3 installments. So why was it decided to increase the amount that we're going to pay for each year? Is it going to save the city money in the long term? Because I don't see where this has any benefit as far as taking money out of what right now could be a high yield savings, with the interest rates being as high as they are, to start paying down something early that doesn't have any interest attached to it. If this is just to pay it off early so we don't have to worry about it, and we're taking an extra, I believe it was $137,000 a year so that we can pay it off 2 years early, we don't have any benefit other than in 2 years, we're not making smaller payments on it because we're making larger balloon payments now. We don't know what the market's going to bring over the next couple years. We should keep the money where it is, allow it to gain interest, and continue with the agreement as we had originally made it. I understand when we see economic development, you think EDC should be paying for it. I do understand because it's a 380 agreement, it is on the city to refund those taxes. But again, we want to make sure that we're doing this in the most fiscally responsible way possible. And as fiduciary representatives, I think that $2 million would be better served for a project that the city needs right now. That would go directly to something that the city operates and benefits our employees. And I believe that if we're going to be making these payments anyway, and there is no interest on what we're going to be paying, then we should be saving that money and using it for other necessities. That $137,000 a year would go a long way towards employee salaries, towards benefits, towards equipment, towards infrastructure that the city desperately needs. instead of just making a little bit of, putting a little bit of extra money in right now because we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Public hearing closed. Council, what is your pleasure? Councilmember Alvarez.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve PH 23-030.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyd.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, yes. All opposed, no.
Wanted to speak.
Sir, the floor is yours.
Yes.
Thank you for that in advance. The floor, Councilmember Boyd, did you want to speak too? Okay, Councilmember Adams.
I had mentioned when the strategic plan was first presented, and I asked, and I support this funding for the homeless shelter to come from the CDBG funds, Vice, from anything excess from our overages for each year. And that still stands, because we have I moved to amend by striking $2 million for the homeless shelter.
Is there a second to that amendment? Is there a second to the amendment? The motion dies. All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Motion carries 6-1 with Adams in opposition. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilmember Alvarez. All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, Councilwoman Cobb.
Bye.